100 public appointments in Northern Ireland. They're sometimes called quangos. And the idea is that we enable people from all sections of society to get involved in the running of organisations as diverse as unpaid school governors' roles or paid positions like non-executive directors of sometimes quite powerful public bodies. But the Commissioner for Public Appointments, John Keanie, who has decided to leave that watchdog role a year early, says those appointments are anything but representative of the diversity of our society. Here's what he told Good Morning Ulster this morning.
That stereotype exists very strongly in the minds of that whole range of people that I talked about, you know, from business leaders to union leaders and women's groups, young people's groups. So, you know, the fact that that perception is there is really, really important. The fact that there is quite an element of truth in it makes it even more important. It's very frustrating to me that government hasn't yet taken that issue as seriously as it should be taken and begun to move to change it.
John Keanie saying it's frustrating to him that really we lack the diversity that we should have within our public bodies, sometimes called quangos. And he said there's a perception, but the perception has a lot of evidence to back it up, that essentially these are the kinds of people who go on to these bodies are not what one would describe as ordinary people. So question is, who is going on to our public bodies? Is this a Jobs for the Boys scheme? Is it a middle-class retirement racket? Some of the figures are significant, aren't they? 64% of board members here are men. 80% of board chairs are men. People under 30 years old make up less than 1% of the boards in our public appointments. Felicity Huston is the former Commissioner for Public Appointments. Felicity, good afternoon to you.
Hi, William.
How do you explain that lack of diversity?
Oh, well, I mean, I have great sympathy with John and I know exactly how he feels. I did the job for 6 years and tried to get something done about diversity. There's this thing, isn't they say, you know, if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you've always got. And that's what happens with the appointments process, despite various people pointing out to the civil service that they keep reproducing the same old process, which reproduces the same people. They just don't want to listen. It's much easier to do what we've always done.
Or is there a strategy behind it, Felicity? Do we actually have a strategy behind the replication of the same kinds of people? Because they're status quo people, they're protective, they're conservative, with a small c. I
don't think there would be anything stated like that. No, there is a strong groupthink in the Northern Ireland Civil Service that it's nice to have what we're familiar with, and we can work with these people. You know, there's a very strong
I'm
feeling
not saying
of
that they would put that on an email, but you remember the old episodes of Yes, Prime Minister, where they talk about sound men. Let's find some sound men. We mean people like us, don't we?
We do, and I mean there are lots of appointments, as we're currently hearing about, that no Commissioner for Public Appointments has a chance to get commenting on, where they just put forward names, and those will be familiar names who have been used lots of times and who have proved to be people we can work with. Absolutely.
How do you change it?
Well, you have to get ministers to recognise that this isn't right, that it is the 21st century and the boys' club has got to stop. We did have, we had a short period of direct rule when I was Commissioner for Public Appointments. And I think it was Angela Eagle was one of the English ministers working here. And she went ballistic, to be quite honest, with the Northern Ireland Civil Service.
I think it was Maria Eagle.
Oh, apologies, Maria Eagle. I'm sorry. Maria Eagle was whichever woman it was, she went spare with the lists of potential appointees she got, which consisted just of men. And I remember hearing about and seeing some of her views on the fact that most of these lists of potential appointees were men, and she told the civil servants to go out there and find some women who had the same skills that she could at least consider. And she's the only minister I ever saw in 6 years bite the bullet and say this has to be done, and that's what needs to happen.
Well, you say the boys' club has got to stop.
Yes.
You were the commissioner.
I can't make
if you couldn't change things, how can anybody else change?
No commissioner can, as currently constituted. And I noticed John Keanie, my successor, saying a piece of things in the Irish News today about when he tried to suggest changes to things. Resistance to change from the civil service was massive. They don't want to change. They don't want a commissioner who has any powers. The commissioner merely really has an advisory role. The duty is to publish a code of practice which ministers are supposed to follow the guidance of. But if they don't, there's no sanctions. So until the legislation is changed to give the Commissioner power to actually do something about some of this, nothing will change.
Felicity, can you stay with us a bit longer? It's good to have you with us. Seamus Close, former politician, is in the studio with me, along with Kit Chivers, former Chief Inspector of Criminal Justice in Northern Ireland, who's also here. Welcome to both of you. You sense the frustration of someone who did the job for 6 years.
Yes, and that in itself is, in many respects, refreshing, that you'd have an individual like John Keanie, who after 4 years, frustration got the better of him, but he didn't just go away quietly. He came out with that rebuke to make the civil service, the head bum of ears in the civil service and the politicians hopefully sit up and take note. And his message has now been reinforced by Felicity. There is a culture in there. And to use that terrible old phrase, but I'm going to use it, the dogs in the street can look and can see a commonality of names that keep appearing on different public appointments. And in fact, if I were to mention just the recent scandal, the NAMA scandal, and if you look at some of the names, and then you cast your mind back and say, didn't I hear that name mentioned on such and such a public body? Wasn't that individual on that other public body? And so it goes on, and it has been going on for years. And when you get... John Keanie's report is out, 18 months? 18 months sitting there, and after 6 months he was told that they were going to do more research into it. Felicity referred to the fact that he said
and
about...
he's going a year early now.
And he's going a year early. But she referred to the fact that the top civil service don't like resistance to change. But he went further. He said they don't even they have a resistance to constructive suggestions. I mean, that's how bad it is. It's jobs for the boys, literally and metaphorically. But worse than that, they also like yes men.
Oh my goodness. Well, Kit, it's at this point, sorry, given that onslaught on the system, I have to explain that you were not only former Chief Inspector for Criminal Justice, but you sat on the board of the Consumer Council, and until last month you were on the Equality Commission as well. So you're a double jobber, Quango man, are you?
I'm obviously the stereotype of this.
I'll explain to people that you're
this member of the Old Boys Club.
You're post-retorment white and male.
I have to say that I've never been regarded as a member of an Old Boys Club before. What I would say about this is I absolutely respect what John and Felicity have said about this. They know much better than I do the problems that there are in this whole area. I'm sure there is a problem. And as a former Equality Commissioner, I would be absolutely dedicated to diversity. I'm all for encouraging diversity as much as you can get it. I have to say the boards that I've served on in Northern Ireland, both the Equality Commission and the Consumer Council, have both had a very good balance of men and women, a balance of gay and straight, balance in political dimensions and so on. So they're well-balanced organisations.
And ethnic diversity?
Some ethnic diversity, but ethnic diversity is more challenging in Northern Ireland. But there is a problem there. I think part of the problem, you have to recognise that these boards they're of many different sorts. They have very different functions. But what they have in common is that they're not basically focus groups, discussion groups that are meant to be representative of people. Their main job is what the Audit Commission calls those charged with governance. They're actually responsible for the management of public organisations. And an awful lot of what they do is just management stuff. It's we would have very interesting discussions in some of these forums, but a lot of the bread and butter work of the boards is managing the business.
But does that mean that you only recruit managers?
Well,
people who have been managers.
What you do, and I stand to be corrected by Felicity on this. When people are recruiting, they set out criteria, things that they look for in the people that they're going to appoint.
And it often says things like board level experience.
Exactly,
which means if you're not on a board, you can't get on a board. Well, you've been on lots of boards, so you can get onto this board.
Okay, I've got. Nobody has appointed me to any boards for the sake of my beautiful eyes, as the French say. They appoint you.
Have a twinkle, Kit.
They appoint you because you've got qualifications. I've been a finance director. I've been a chief executive of an organisation. I've been a chairman of a board. And it's actually it's having what the people who are appointing look for is people who are qualified to do the job. Now, along with that, you look for diversity. But you're obviously, in a small place like Northern Ireland, by the time you're trying to look for people who've got the qualifications to do the job, plus trying to get a diverse field, it's quite challenging.
But what qualifications do you need to do the job when you're not an executive running the organisation? You're on the board, which means that you might, for example, Seamus, you might be sharing your moral perspective on the board's activities, but you're not the chief executive. You don't have to have that kind of experience, surely.
No, I don't think you do. And I think it is all about diversity of skills as well as diversity with relation to whether it's male, female, people with disability or whatever. But it is easy. It seems to me that it is easier. The simple thing is to take someone who has got a bit of a pedigree, having been on a particular board or a particular body beforehand, a safe pair of hands, and let's just get on with it.
Don't rock the boat.
Don't rock the boat.
Kit, have you ever rocked the boat?
Well, one of the skills that you require in... These are called arm's-length bodies, right? They're always in a tension with the ministers who own them. The ministers who own them would often like to micromanage them and intervene. And one of the things you have to be able to do as a board member is to maintain that balance. You can't actually tell the minister to push off because the minister is your paymaster. But at the same time, you have to be able to stand up to the minister and say, look, minister, this is our constitutional position. This is our duty to do things. And you may not actually like this all the time. Now, handling that relationship, that is quite an art. That's a fine art of management, or sort of political management.
Incidentally, I noticed the Probation Board for Northern Ireland is trying to recruit 6 new board members, and the Department of Justice sent this through to us. Part of their advertisement for this says, in keeping with the departmental policy on diversity, we would also welcome applications from those not currently serving on public bodies. Felicity,
what does that mean?
Does that suggest that they recognise they have a problem of over-replication?
Robert, most of the public bodies have been saying that for about 15 years now. It doesn't make a heap of difference. I mean, interesting, John Keanie's diversity strategy that he published, and he's complaining that nobody's done anything with. There was a commissioner before me, Baroness Fritchie, the English commissioner who oversaw things here, and she did a diversity strategy, and I inherited it. And it was full of great ideas, and nothing was done with it. Lots of noise was made about what great ideas. They talk a good talk. Oh, we're looking at that. Those are some great ideas. Boys, dear, did you ever tell me that? Sort of attitude. And then John did the same thing probably about 10 years later, and the same thing has happened. I mean, Kid's point about the sort of relationship with ministers, well, ultimately ministers can sack quangos, chairs, members, etc., and that has been known to have happened.
So you've got to watch your back.
You have, and if you upset, it's not even so much the minister, I have to say, it's much more the senior staff. If you upset them, you'll certainly not find yourself welcome back for anything else. If you're
and you won't be getting a gong at the end of it all.
No, indeed, that certainly seems to happen as well. If you're stroppy, you shouldn't expect to get the gong that other might be. No, exactly.
Do you actually then believe that this is a middle-class retirement racket?
Well, goodness, that's a good way of. It's one way of sort of describing it. It's a.
I know it's journalese, but
it is a bit journalese.
Accurate?
Well, yes, in many ways it is. It's something that people do, and I mean, one has to remember that a lot of these bodies are unpaid. There's big money in some, but there's a heck of a lot that aren't, and one has to recognise that people are willing to put themselves forward. And, I was always very grateful for people who would willing to sit on things that weren't very glamorous, like was mentioned today, the Drainage Council. That's not...
Somebody's got to do it.
Somebody's got to do it. It's not the Strategic Investment Board. And, health trusts aren't the easiest places to sit at the moment and chair those bodies. So there is that side, which we must recognise, and people are willing to do it. But on the other side, people think, well, what'll I do now? Oh, I know, I'll put myself forward for a body, and somebody said I'm the very man for the job. And now there is a process, I'm not denying that in many cases. But if you understand how to do it, and you've got the skills that are easily recognised by the people who are looking for the appointees, it's easy to get the job.
Felicity, you're not looking for a gong at the minute, are you?
Oh, don't be silly.
I can tell that.
It's quite obvious.
No, I can tell that from what you're saying. The gloves are off today. There's no messing about.
Well, I think I recognised some time ago after I stood down that obviously my gong had got lost in the post, but that's one of those things.
08459 555 678 is the number to call. 2p a minute for your calls plus access charges. and we're on Twitter at BBC Talkback. Let's get some calls on the... Oh, sorry, before we go to the calls, can we just ask on the money? You were on the Consumer Council. That was unpaid, Kit, was it?
It was. We were paid a fee of £50 a meeting.
Right, so expenses really, in that case. And then the Equality Commission...
Equality Commission was £5,000 a year for about 3 days a month. So
Okay.
if you multiply that, about 35,000 a year sort of thing.
All right. Alex, good afternoon. Hi, Alex.
Good afternoon, William.
What do you think, Alex?
Yes, as I was saying to the researcher there, my point was why should not have a retired joiner from D Street or maybe a plumber from the Springfield Road? I mean, it'd be interesting to find out how many people, tradesmen, have been accepted in these quangos over the years.
And some of the quangos actually have to do with those trades and economic issues.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's ladies' trades as well, shop assistants and things that ladies do well. Why, these people have got, I'm sure, as good life experience as some of these so-called professionals have.
Well, Felicity, you might have the answer. Why don't we see any joiners from the Springfield Road on these quangos?
Absolutely, because those skills wouldn't be recognised by the people who are composing the board.
But want a bank manager instead?
Yeah, we have the Construction Industry Training something or other board. I think it's changed its name a few times, but it is full of people who run companies that have tradesmen in it. I'm not sure there are very many people who've actually done their time and worked like that and possibly worked their way up actually sitting on that board. And there's a skills czar, I think we have as well, who I don't think has ever served his time as an apprentice. So no, I mean, it does happen. There is no doubt about it.
Alex, have you ever considered yourself applying for a quango?
I have never, but I don't see any reason. I'm sure I would be as well qualified as some of the people. I make mistakes, many mistakes in life, but some of these people make terrible ones too. So, why not?
We'll put out on our Twitter feed, we'll put out the link to the NI Direct website, which lists the various quangos that you can apply for, or public appointments, we should say, which you can apply for. And it may be that many people simply don't know how to do it, Seamus, how to actually make an application online. Now it's very simple. You get the information, though you may not meet the criteria if you haven't already been on a board.
But I think this type of combined innovative thinking of making the website known to the general public, because you don't have to have qualifications. There are life skills. The ordinary person in the street, male, female, with disability or whatever, carry with them a lot of skills. They recognise, in many respects too, they recognise the pain and the difficulty of living with various cutbacks, the way in which different departments are attempting to operate. There needs to be a dose of reality brought onto some of these quangos by the ordinary person. And it's getting the information across to them and getting a recognition that they can and should apply, and that they will not be treated with disdain because they haven't got a
for having the audacity to apply. Joan, what do you think?
I totally agree with the last speaker. I just think that I have on a number of occasions looked at the application. I have a degree, by the way, but I have much more important things than a degree. I have a lot of life experience, left a widow at 34, etc., etc., etc. And for me, the reason for people not applying is that, first of all, they won't meet the criteria. For it's all about education. Where did you go in your education? It's not about the social skills, communication skills, and the knowledge that you have from life experience in most of the areas that these quangos work in.
Yeah. What would you...
And for me, their work, it puts you off. You think, oh God, no, I couldn't.
Yeah, the criteria is to...
Well, could I just point out...
Yeah, go ahead, Felicity.
To Joan, your education isn't something that's asked about. I can understand why you may feel that, but it's not. There's certain jobs in some of these boards where they need an academic with a specialisation in, microbiology or something.
That, yes.
But, I mean, other than that, in fact, it's something that I very strongly press the civil service to stop asking about your education, because it is an irrelevance, unless, say, it's a very particular job. So it is... And I understand issues about criteria and all that, but just for people in general to know that you don't have to have a degree to sit in a public body, and they will not ask you what A levels you've got and things like that, because those are completely irrelevant to whether you can demonstrate the skills that they want on the board.
It'd be interesting if we could get all of our talkback listeners to flood the market, Joan. Let's get them all in there applying for public appointments and see how well they do.
Well, William, what I'm saying is that may be the case, but that last person said, that if meeting the criteria, you don't have to have education. What it is about filling in the application forms, but is about, I mean, some people are extremely skilled but don't have literacy skills in that type of sense. Not that they can't read and write, but they don't have that level of literacy skills to fill in those forms. As I said to the girl who was on the phone, you nearly need a PhD in English to fill in the forms, some of them I've seen. And I think really it needs to be encouraged in how would you put, positive discrimination, to encourage people who have the life knowledge and the life skills, because that's what's needed on the board. I sat on the PCSP for Newton Abbey for the length of time that one was in operation, and that's what was the big thing about it. Your life skills and all those skills that you learn throughout your life at the different hands-on jobs you've done, like working in a factory and
it all comes to play.
They all came into play, and therefore you were an equal partner within that.
Joan, thanks very much. We have a statement from the Office of First Minister and Deputy First Minister. Their spokesperson says that they of course, recognise the valuable work of Mr Keanie, the work he's carried out during his time as Commissioner for Public Appointments. We will continue to work with Mr Keanie's successor to ensure the focus on diversity is maintained and to consider further improvements. And she's down the line, but I can see the smile on Felicity Huston's face as you could have written those words yourself.
I don't think they were even as polite about me when I left. But the interesting other thing is, of course, that there is no current Commissioner for Public Appointments. I mean, they've known for some time that John was going, and I think they have advertised, but, we have now no Commissioner for Public Appointments. Which is a bit of an issue as well, so yes, indeed, let's hope they can work with their successor, but it does all sound rather similar, doesn't it?
Norman, would you be up for the job?
Yes, William.
Stick in an application.
My first job would be to get rid of the whole lot of them at Stormont, and that's the only way you're going to change anything. North-South bodies, parades, commission, hospital trusts, education boards, it's all jobs for the boys. And there today, what did we hear? A new victims commissioner. How much is she getting paid?
75 grand a year.
It's costing this country millions when you add it all up every year, and we don't need half of these people.
What about school governors, Norman? Do we need school governors?
We do not, William.
Don't need those either?
A school will run itself.
Who would run the country if you had your way, Norman?
Of course, you need people on a board, but you don't need half of them. It's jobs for the boys. If 5 people can run a hospital board, why have we got 10 and 15 people sitting on it?
All right, Norman, thank you.
Jobs for the boys, that's what it is.
Norman will not be applying for a Quango anytime soon. David, what about you? Ever considered it?
Well, you're very quick to run down people on DLA and on the brew because they're strangling the country. Them people is just strangling our country. They're getting this job for the boys is just unbelievable. And why would you employ a bank manager on a Quango after the mess they made? It's unbelievable.
Yeah, you think that should be a disqualification?
Bank managers, well, you like it or not, bank managers put us on their knees. And they should not be trying to run the country.
Well, there are different kinds of bank managers. There are those big international investment banks, but then you've got local bank managers who've done a great job over the years with families.
Managers put us on our knees.
Okay.
I run a wee small business, and the local bank manager is as bad as the big bank.
We're not going to get into naming local bank managers, David, but I take your point. I take your point. You think that they don't earn it. I'm not sure, Felicity, how much money is spent on remuneration across the board for Quangos. What do you reckon?
It is incomplete. I don't know what the actual number is.
But you're talking about millions, are you?
Probably, yes. But I mean, it's bizarre what goes on. The Belfast Metropolitan College here, right? It's the biggest FE college in the UK, possibly in Europe. The chairman of that board gets paid nothing. Right, you think of the money that's involved there. Meanwhile, you get the SIB chairman is paid, the chairman of the health trusts are paid, the Consumer Council, as Kit was mentioning, which I was deputy chairman of many years ago. You get a small remuneration for it, but it's basically an advisory body with some complaints handling things. But then, I say things like all the further education colleges, they don't pay them. Certain departments refuse to pay people, others pay them a lot. Yet I can remember a conversation with the Permanent Secretary when I raised this point of how little they were paying for a particular body. And he said, yeah, no, I wouldn't do it for that.
Yeah.
That was his attitude, but it didn't really matter because, it didn't really count. Somebody would come forward and do it for them. It was a very strange attitude.
William,
the fact that the remuneration is a lot less, we should say, here than it would be in, say, London or other parts of England, isn't that right?
Well, in general, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we have some big bodies. I mean, the one that are big positions. I mean, the one that was mentioned there is the Victims Commissioner. I mean, they probably have to pay $75,000 a year because they can't get anybody much to come forward for it. In fact, they had to raise
it by
the fees. I mean,
to get applicants.
The very best of luck to her because people don't want to do that job. It's very difficult.
I'm sure the other applicants will be saying, she'll need all the luck she can get.
Absolutely, and every last penny to compensate for how hard a job that is. But those sort of things. So I don't know. I mean, I've never done really a big comparator with the fees in England. I think we have more unpaid bodies here actually than in England. I think that's the right way.
But they still got influence. Kit?
Just going back to the caller who asked about the application forms, I do think there's something that could be done about those. The way the application forms are at the moment, it does require a lot. You need to have a lot of track record. You need to show examples of the way that you've handled problems in the past. And if you haven't got that experience, it really does rule people out. So I think that there is some thinking that could be done about that. I mean...
So the perfect applicant's a chief executive, a senior manager or a civil servant.
Exactly. But Seamus is right. Not everybody has to have those skills on the board. You can have a board that was comprised of some people who've got the necessary skills to do the governance stuff, but other people, contributing from their experience.
Brian is there. Hi, Brian.
Hi, how are you?
Brian, I'm told you actually took a course on how to get onto one of these boards.
Yeah, it was a public course. It was called Get On Board.
Yeah.
We probably met Brian, did we?
For a number of...
You probably met Felicity then. She probably organised that.
Well, no, I used to come speak to some of them, so we may have met at that, Brian. Yep.
Tell us about it, Brian.
Well, we went along. I can't remember the young lady's name who ran it, but it was very good. And the emphasis was to get women and underrepresented groups on boards, explain the application and explain what you were just talking about there. How you could demonstrate relevant experience to dealing with a situation. I mean, you could be a farmer and you could have experience of situations that you had dealt with. I think it was a matter of demonstrating common sense and, that your particular experience depending on what board you were applying for. So I thought it was very good. I know for quite a while after it, I used to get emails saying what appointments were available in that. But
did you ever apply?
No, I didn't see anything that interested me.
Sure.
So I did.
A lot of people don't realise the skills that they have and how transferable they are, or the experiences that they have and how transferable they are. Thank you very much, Brian.
That was actually the purpose, very much as I felt, of this particular course, and it was a very good course, and I would have commended. I don't know if it's still running, but I think it may. When I was doing it, we had a talk from the Commissioner, and I think it could very well have been related. Yeah, I don't know.
No, it was. It was a great course. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Brian. Everybody who went on it thought it was wonderful. It was a woman called Eileen Mullen who used to lead the course.
It is, yes,
and she was tremendous. But enthusiasm from the civil servants fell apart with it. The money dried up not long before any cuts or anything. It sort of fell between a couple of stools, and unfortunately after about 3 years of running it, it stopped. It was tremendous, and it was showing success as well. People were coming forward and applying successfully to bodies as a result of it.
So they stopped it then, did they?
I think even I'm not that cynical.
It got to be too successful. Mary, hi, how are you doing, Mary?
Hello.
Mary, good afternoon to you.
Hello.
Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah. Oh, no, I just was listening to you, William, there, and I heard you talk about school governors.
Yeah.
Now, and I assumed that the way you were speaking, that you thought school governors were being paid.
Oh, absolutely not. No, I mentioned unpaid school governors and paid non-executive directors of other bodies.
Yes, that's right. So just to say that school governors are very important, because at the end of the day, they are the people who are responsible for the school, for the running of the school, and they're also responsible when things go wrong. So, but at the moment they don't get paid. I'm not necessarily saying they should get paid, but it is a very important job, and I think it's probably as important as any other.
It is, Mary, but just setting aside the money aspect of it, it's unpaid. Do you think school governors as a body are typically diverse? enough male-female diversity, for example, or ethnic minorities, or class divisions or class strata within the board? What do you think?
Well, I chair a nursery school at the moment, and I have to say we've only got one man on the board. But I mean, overall, I have been on many boards of governors of schools of all kinds, and I think now, for example, the Education Library Board, they do nominate people, their representatives, onto the boards of governors. So, I think probably there could be more done to make them more diverse. But certainly we would have parents, we'd have representatives from the ELB, etc. So we certainly try to have it.
Thank you, Mary.
Situation.
Thank you very much.
Possible. Okay.
I notice on the Northern Ireland Direct website, advertising public appointments, Felicity, that they're looking for board members for the Northern Ireland Office Management Board.
Oh, right. That's
is
not
that
one.
important?
I have to say, it is not one I am familiar with. It must be a new body. I don't know that one, so I'm sorry.
Running the Northern Ireland office?
Another layer of bureaucracy.
Oh, so this is the NIO?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Sorry, I misunderstood. Yes, right. Well, that'll be separate. That'll be done and overseen by my colleague, or my former colleague in England, I should say, the Commissioner in England, because the Northern Ireland Office appointments are done differently. It'll be a body that is brought in to behave a bit like a non-executive role, to oversee and hold them to account for how they're running it. Not as in their policy decisions on parades and things, but how they're running their, spending their money and employing staff and things like that. It'll be that sort of a role, I would think.
Okay, final word from Seamus.
Yeah, in many respects, a lot of these bodies are like skins of an onion, layers of an onion. And the bottom line is they're protecting the minister. How many times where there are difficulties through lack of finance or whatever, the minister doesn't appear, he blames a trust or a board or some other quango. So they're protective mechanisms. That's why, in my opinion, the civil service feel they have to get the right people on to be able to protect and defend the minister.
We're going to take some more calls on this. Lots of you want to talk about the kind of board you might want to be on, how you would run the country if you had your way.